Now, if you've ever wondered why the galaxy's most advanced civilizations spend their time categorizing species like they're organizing a particularly deadly zoo, you're asking the right questions. The Galactic Federation's three-tier system works like this. Garden world species get the easy planets where the biggest threat is aggressive fruit. Standard world species handle normal planets with reasonable amounts of murder built into the ecosystem. And Deathworld species, well, they get the planets that actively try to kill everything on them every Tuesday. Humans, naturally, fell into that last category. What nobody expected was that after crawling out of Earth's delightfully homicidal biosphere, humans would become the galaxy's most confusing pacifists. Ambassador Zara Okafor understood this confusion intimately as she sat across from War-Prince Thex'mol of the Keth'varian Hegemony, watching him work himself into what could generously be called a diplomatic frenzy. The Keth'varians had evolved from pack hunters on a world where cooperation meant survival, which translated into a civilization that viewed conflict as a bonding exercise. Thex'mol's species had turned warfare into an art form, complete with ritualistic posturing and elaborate threat displays that would make a peacock jealous. Your colony on Meridian 7 sits on sacred Keth'varian hunting grounds, Thex'mol declared, his forearms gesticulating in patterns that probably meant something threatening in his culture. We demand immediate evacuation, or we will take it by force. Okafor smiled with the kind of professional politeness that had been refined through centuries of diplomatic training. I understand your concerns, War-Prince. However, our settlement predates your claim by approximately 47 years. Perhaps we could discuss a compromise? The other Federation representatives watched this exchange with the fascination of spectators at a sporting event. The Velthari delegation had actually started a betting pool on when the humans would finally snap and do something characteristically Deathworlder-ish. The smart money was on never, which frustrated everyone who understood statistics. You see, this was the galaxy's great mystery. Humans possessed the most advanced military technology, had survived a planet that treated extinction events like seasonal weather, and had demonstrated an alarming capacity for creative violence when pressed. Yet in 3 centuries of galactic citizenship, they had never fired the first shot in any conflict. The Keth'varians interpreted this as weakness. The Velthari thought it was elaborate psychological warfare. The crystalline Zephyrians, who communicated through harmonic frequencies, had composed entire symphonies trying to understand human motivations. None of them had figured it out. Thex'mol's patience, never his strongest virtue, was wearing thin. You speak of compromise, human, but we speak of honor. Our ancestors hunted these grounds when your species was still learning to make fire. Actually, Okafor replied, consulting her tablet with infuriating calm, our archaeological surveys indicate your ancestors first reached that system roughly 2,000 years after we established agricultural civilization. But I'm sure that's just a minor historical discrepancy. The War-Prince's skin shifted to a deeper shade of purple, which his species' body language experts would recognize as barely contained rage. Around the chamber, alien diplomats leaned forward. Surely now the humans would show their true nature. Instead, Okafor began filling out forms. If there's one thing that unites every species in the galaxy, it's a shared bewilderment at human bureaucracy. While other civilizations had streamlined their administrative processes through technology, humans had somehow made paperwork into a defensive art form. Thex'mol watched in growing frustration as Okafor methodically documented his threats, cross-referenced them with 17 different treaty provisions, and began what appeared to be a formal complaint process that could theoretically continue until the heat death of the universe. "I have issued a formal challenge," the War-Prince growled. "Your response should be to accept, or flee in shame." "Oh, I'm responding," Okafor assured him, not looking up from her tablet. "I'm filing a diplomatic incident report, Form 27B, with subsections covering territorial disputes, cultural misunderstandings, and threats of violence against civilian populations. This will be forwarded to the appropriate departments for review." The Velthari ambassador Krixtal couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "Ambassador Okafor, surely your people must have some limit to their patience? The War-Prince has essentially declared his intention to invade your colony." Okafor finally looked up, and for just a moment something flickered behind her diplomatic smile that made several species' survival instincts twitch uncomfortably. "Oh, we have procedures for that too. Very thorough procedures." This was the part that drove the galaxy to distraction. Humans had procedures for everything, and those procedures were classified at levels that made other species nervous. The infamous Terran incident reports had become something of a legend in diplomatic circles. Nobody knew exactly what they contained, but every species that had ever been on the receiving end of one had immediately changed their behavior. Thex'mol, however, came from a warrior culture that viewed backing down as worse than death. "Your procedures mean nothing to Keth'varian steel. We will take Meridian 7 in 3 standard days. Prepare your colonists for evacuation or conquest." The betting pools around the galaxy immediately updated their odds. Surely this would be the moment humans finally revealed their true nature. 3 days to respond to a direct military threat. Even the most patient species would start mobilizing their fleets. Instead, Okafor nodded thoughtfully and made another note on her tablet. 3 days. That's very considerate of you, War-Prince. That gives us time to complete the proper documentation. I'll need to file a Form 31C for imminent hostile action, cross-reference it with our mutual defense treaties, and submit a preliminary response authorization request. "Response authorization?" Krixtal asked, his translator struggling with the concept. "Well, we can't just respond to military aggression without proper authorization," Okafor explained, as if this were the most reasonable thing in the galaxy. "There are protocols to follow, impact assessments to complete, proportional response calculations to verify. It's all very standard." Thex'mol's 4 fists clenched simultaneously. "You speak of paperwork, while I speak of war." "Yes," Okafor agreed pleasantly, "and I'm sure you'll find our paperwork very thorough. We've had quite a lot of practice with it." As the War-Prince stormed out of the chamber, promising destruction and glory in equal measure, the other ambassadors couldn't help but notice that Okafor had immediately opened a secure communication channel. The message she sent was brief, but it carried a priority classification that made the chamber's monitoring systems briefly hiccup. The message read simply, "Incident escalation confirmed. Please prepare Response Package 7 for potential deployment." Somewhere in the depths of human space, Admiral Chen Volkov received that message and sighed deeply. Then he began making preparations that would have terrified the galaxy if they had known what Response Package 7 actually contained. War-Prince Thex'mol had never felt more vindicated in his life. The human colony on Meridian 7 had fallen in exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes, which was honestly longer than he'd expected, given their pathetic defensive preparations. A single orbital garrison, minimal ground forces, and what appeared to be a complete lack of military urgency. It was almost insulting how easy it had been. His warriors had swept through the settlement with textbook precision, capturing strategic points and herding the colonists into designated areas. The humans had offered token resistance before surrendering with what Thex'mol could only interpret as cowardly relief. Finally, the galaxy would see these so-called Deathworlders for what they truly were: soft creatures hiding behind bureaucratic nonsense. War-Prince, his communications officer, reported, "We're receiving a transmission from the human ambassador." Thex'mol straightened, preparing to accept what he assumed would be either desperate pleas for mercy or furious threats of retaliation. Instead, Ambassador Okafor appeared on screen, looking exactly as calm as she had 3 days ago, still holding that damned tablet. "Congratulations on your successful military operation, War-Prince," she said with genuine-sounding politeness. "I trust our colonists are being treated according to galactic warfare conventions." "They are prisoners of war, but unharmed," Thex'mol replied, somewhat deflated by her lack of dramatic response. "Do you call to surrender your claim to this world?" "Oh no, nothing like that. I'm just updating my paperwork. The incident report has been processed and approved by all relevant departments. I wanted to thank you for waiting the full 3 days. It really did make the authorization process much smoother." Something cold crawled up Thex'mol's spine. Authorization for what? Okafor consulted her tablet with the same bureaucratic thoroughness she'd shown throughout their negotiations. "Response Package 7 has been approved for deployment. Admiral Volkov sends his compliments and wants you to know this is nothing personal. Ah, and he asked me to mention that you might want to check your long-range sensors." The communications officer's panicked voice cut through the chamber before Thex'mol could respond. "War-Prince, multiple contacts dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Massive energy signatures. I count over 200 vessels." Thex'mol's blood turned to ice water. His own invasion force consisted of 37 ships, which had been considered overwhelming for taking a single agricultural colony. 200 ships wasn't a fleet. It was an extinction event. "Ambassador," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "surely this is a disproportionate response to a minor territorial dispute?" Okafor looked genuinely confused. "Disproportionate? War-Prince, you invaded a human colony. Our response protocols are quite specific about that sort of thing." She paused, checking something on her screen. "Actually, this is our minimal response package. Admiral Volkov was very restrained in his force selection." "Minimal?" Thex'mol croaked. "Well, yes. Package 7 is designed for limited territorial incursions with minimal civilian casualties. If you'd actually harmed our colonists, we would have had to escalate to Package 12, and nobody wants that kind of paperwork." The tactical display showed the human fleet advancing with mechanical precision. Each ship was larger than Thex'mol's flagship, and the energy readings suggested weapons systems that could crack planets. This wasn't a military response. It was what happened when an entire civilization decided to casually flex. "Perhaps," Thex'mol said carefully, "we could discuss terms." Admiral Chen Volkov had been hoping he wouldn't need to use Response Package 7 this decade. Not because he was particularly peaceful by nature, but because cleaning up afterward was always such a bureaucratic nightmare. The after-action reports alone would take weeks. His fleet had surrounded the Keth'varian force with the kind of overwhelming superiority that made resistance not just futile, but actively embarrassing. The alien ships looked like toys scattered around his dreadnoughts, and their weapons couldn't penetrate human shielding, even if they'd been brave enough to fire. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the Keth'varian commander is requesting immediate surrender terms." "Already?" Volkov checked his chronometer. "We've been here less than an hour. That might be a new record. The truth was, humans had learned something important during their first few centuries in galactic society. They were really, really bad at proportional responses. When someone punched a human, humans had a tendency to nuke the puncher's entire planet, then apologize profusely and help rebuild it better than before. It was embarrassing for everyone involved. So they'd developed a simple policy: never throw the first punch. Let the other species start the fight, document everything thoroughly, and then respond with the kind of overwhelming force that ended conflicts before they could escalate into something genuinely destructive. It was actually quite humanitarian once you understood the philosophy. War-Prince Thex'mol's face appeared on the main screen, and Volkov was impressed to see the alien was maintaining his dignity despite obvious terror. "Admiral, I formally surrender my forces and request clemency for my warriors. We may have misunderstood human intentions." "No harm done, War-Prince," Volkov replied cheerfully. "We'll have your people back to Keth'varian space within the week. Our medical teams are already treating your wounded, and will cover the repair costs for your damaged ships." "You're not going to destroy our fleet? Occupy our worlds?" Volkov looked genuinely puzzled. "Why would we do that? You attacked one of our colonies. We stopped you from attacking it further. Mission accomplished. Though I should mention that Admiral Reyes wanted to come instead of me, she would have brought Package 12, and that includes planetary siege equipment. Consider yourselves fortunate that Ambassador Okafor likes proper procedures." The galaxy watched this exchange with the dawning realization that they had fundamentally misunderstood human nature. Humans weren't pacifists. They were the galactic equivalent of a nuclear reactor with really, really good safety protocols. They didn't attack first, because when they finally did respond, they had a tendency to accidentally commit genocide through sheer enthusiasm. Ambassador Okafor appeared on a secondary channel, still holding her tablet. "War-Prince, I've completed the post-incident documentation. Your invasion has been classified as a cultural misunderstanding rather than an act of war, so there won't be any formal sanctions. However, I would appreciate it if you could sign this acknowledgement that Meridian 7 belongs to human space. It'll save us both paperwork if this comes up again." Thex'mol signed the document so quickly he nearly broke the stylus. As the human fleet began its withdrawal, leaving behind only a small patrol group and several cargo ships full of humanitarian supplies, the galaxy finally understood why Deathworlders never attacked first. It wasn't mercy or pacifism or incomprehensible alien psychology. It was a safety feature for everyone else's protection.